My parents died during my senior year of high school. They left me nothing but a crumbling brick shack in a forgotten neighborhood. That was the same year I found a boy in the trash. He was the top student in the junior class at my school. But nobody respected him. Even when he was being bullied in the hallways, the teachers looked the other way. If the kids didn't hit him, his alcoholic father would. And his spineless mother never dared to fight back. I dragged him home and spent days nursing his wounds. I gave him a place to hide. Later, when his mother was finally beaten to death, I was the one who called the cops and watched them haul his father away. Hey, live with me from now on, I told him. I have no family left either. Call me your sister, and I'll pay for your tuition. He wanted to go to an Ivy League school, so I dropped out. I worked illegal night shifts and sold my plasma at underground clinics. After he graduated, he wanted to start his own firm. I handed him every single penny I had ever saved. Until the day I saw him standing on a glittering stage. He was holding a Young Entrepreneur Award next to a radiant, beautiful girl. I looked down at the cancer diagnosis in my hand. I let out a bitter laugh. I had raised him into a man I was no longer worthy of standing beside. It was time for me to make my exit. I stood up to leave the gala when Lydia called my name from behind. Lucian was walking right beside her. When they reached me, Lydia naturally tucked her arm into his. She gave me a brilliant smile and held out the trophy. Shay, you should have this. He wouldn't be here without you. I looked at Lucian. His expression was as cold and indifferent as ever. He simply nodded. Take it, he said. My heart was screaming, but I forced a smile as I took the cold medal. I'd keep it as a memento for whatever time I had left. Maybe I'd put it in my urn later. I could show it to my parents in the afterlife. Look how great I was, I'd tell them. I raised a titan of industry. He's handsome, successful, and found a perfect partner. Before the tears could spill, I turned and walked away. Back at the apartment, I looked around one last time. I had rented this place the year he got into college. Every corner was packed with memories from the last 6 years. That night, I packed my few belongings. I made a special hangover soup and sat at the table to wait. The clock ticked past midnight before I finally heard the door. Lydia was the one helping him inside. Sorry, Shay, she whispered. There were so many clients at the celebration. They kept pushing drinks on him. You aren't mad, are you? I shook my head. Help him into the bedroom. Get his jacket off. Her face turned red, and she bit her lip. I don't know. We aren't together yet. Lucian is usually so distant. Don't worry, I said quietly. You'll be together soon. He smiles more at you than he ever has at me in 10 years. We undressed him together. Lydia fed him the soup, spoonful by spoonful. He stirred eventually, mumbling in his sleep. Shay, closed the restaurant. I'll buy you a house, you need to rest. He drifted off before he could finish. Lydia sighed. The company just got on track, Shay. We're still short on capital. I know, I replied. I won't let him buy a house. Your careers come first. I grabbed my suitcase from the living room. Lydia, I'm leaving for a while. Tell him goodbye for me. I walked out the door without looking back. A proper goodbye would have been too hard. I never liked emotional scenes anyway. After a 20-hour train ride, I was back at my old, broken shack. The neighbors had all moved out. The alley was hauntingly quiet. I sat on the sofa and realized my phone had died hours ago on the train. The moment I plugged it in, a call flashed on the screen. It was Lucian. Why was your phone off? Where are you? I let out a soft laugh. The battery died, Lucian. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm just not coming back. I couldn't come back even if I wanted to. The line went silent for a long time. His voice was low and raspy when he spoke again. You're trying to say goodbye forever. It wasn't a question. He was too sharp not to notice my things were gone. I didn't answer his point. Instead, I asked, It's been 10 years. Do you still hate me for sending your father to prison? He didn't answer. I'm coming to get you, he said, then hung up. Tears hit my screen, shattering into a million tiny droplets. I tried to wipe them away, but my eyes wouldn't stop leaking. He had always been a man of few words. But after his father was sentenced to death, he became even more of a ghost. I didn't understand it back then. He had suffered so much abuse. I thought I was helping him. I didn't realize he'd carry that resentment for years. Sitting alone in this empty house, I finally understood. I grew up loved. My parents cherished me. But him? Even in that house of horrors, he was desperate for a scrap of affection. I was the one who cut his final tie to the only family he knew. No matter how many years I spent by his side, his heart was a lonely place. I fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. I dreamed of the first time I saw him with Lydia. It was a dinner celebrating his first startup. When I arrived, his friends were cheering. Lucian, you two look so good together. I've never seen a better match. Just get together already. I looked down at my cheap, worn-out clothes. I didn't go inside. Later that night, Lucian asked me a question. What makes two people a good match? I smiled. It's when everyone looks at you and just knows you belong together. The year we started living together, rumors flew around school. A group of kids cornered me in an alley to mock me. They flicked lit cigarettes at my skin. They tore my clothes and left burn marks on my arms. They said Lucian's dad used to do that to his mom. They said that was the only reason a boy like him would ever want someone like me. Everyone said I was a predator. They said we were a joke. And they were right. A plain girl like me didn't belong by his side. Then Lucian asked another question. Does a lifelong commitment require both people to give everything? I shook my head. Sometimes one person's sacrifice is enough. It just depends on how much they love you. When he got into college, I went to a black market clinic to sell my plasma. I went 3 days in a row until I was white as a sheet. As soon as I could stand, I took a job at an illegal kennel. I used to love dogs. But there, I watched them tear each other apart in the pits. I was the one who had to bury the losers in the dirt. A loud banging on the door jolted me awake. It was morning. I rushed to open it, but the man standing there was a stranger. A wave of disappointment hit me. Maybe deep down, I actually thought Lucian would show up. He didn't. Imruban. I'm with the development company. This whole block is being demolished, and I'm here to talk numbers. I let him in. He didn't waste time, but the offer was pathetic. No way. You need to do better than that. Normally, I wouldn't fight. But I was dying. I wanted to leave Lucian as much money as possible. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucian. Sorry, a business trip came up. I'll come get you in a few days. Then came a message from Lydia. Shay, don't be mad. I was too scared to go on this trip alone, so I begged Lucian to come with me. I replied with 2 words. That's fine. Rowan haggled with me for half the morning. My stomach growled right on cue. He smiled, showing a row of perfect white teeth. Let me buy you breakfast. I haven't eaten either. I didn't turn him down. Every cent I saved was another cent for Lucian. At the diner, he started venting to me. I'm just a guy doing his job. I really want everyone to get a fair price. By the way, do you need to check with your boyfriend? I let out a dry laugh. Are you fishing for info? I don't have a boyfriend. Satisfied? He scratched his head awkwardly. I didn't mean it like that. Your neighbors told me a lot about you. I was curious. They said your optimism is what really stands out, he added. I froze at the word optimism. I didn't say a word. I just got up and walked home. The moment the door closed, I broke down. I used to be so positive. Even after my parents died, I didn't give up. I stayed upbeat through 10 years of Lucian's cold shoulder. I tried everything to make him laugh. I always thought the world was broken, but it could be mended with a smile. I don't know when I became such a pessimist. Maybe it started when I met Lydia, or the day I got the cancer diagnosis. Or maybe it was because I realized there was no reason to keep smiling anymore. The crying triggered a sharp pain in my gut. I ended up coughing a mouthful of blood onto the floor. I realized I'd forgotten my medication. I crawled to the table and swallowed the pills. It took a long time before I could sit up and breathe normally again. Suddenly, my phone started vibrating like crazy. Lucian was sending a flood of links. My agent sent these listings. Take a look and pick one. I'll be there in 7 days to take you to the viewings. I couldn't help but smirk. I typed back. Kid, do you even know where I am? Our old home, he replied instantly. My tears started falling again. That was the first time he had ever called this place home. Back then, every time I said, let's go home and eat, he'd snap back. That's not my home, he would say. Now he was finally admitting it, but the home was going to vanish along with me. I didn't look at the listings, but I started imagining him coming to get me in 7 days. Then Lydia's messages started flooding in. They were photos of her and Lucian at various tourist spots. She had a sweet smile and eyes full of joy. Lucian was his usual stoic self. But if I zoomed in, I could see the tiniest curve at the corner of his mouth. Shay, this place is so beautiful. Don't worry, Lucian is having a great time with me. I touched the screen with trembling fingers. I realized we didn't have a single photo together. 10 years and not one picture. Maybe it was for the best. He'd forget me faster once I was gone. Good. As long as he's happy, I replied. I cried myself to sleep again that night. I felt so pathetic. The next morning, there was another knock at the door. It was Rowan again. This time he wasn't in a suit. He held a container of homemade dumplings. A few of your neighbors are still holding out. To make things easier, I moved in next door. I made these myself. Want some? I nodded and let him in. As he was helping me clear the table, he spotted my pills. What are these for? I snatched them away. Sleepwalking. You better be careful. I might chop you up like a watermelon in the middle of the night. Whoa, hey now. I'm not even ripe yet, he joked. We looked at each other and burst into laughter. I laughed so hard my back hurt. Over the next few days, he became my meal buddy. It wasn't just about saving money anymore. I wanted to know what it felt like to have a friend. Lucian kept texting me every day. Your hair dryer is ancient. I bought you a new one. Use it when we get back. I saw a bag at the mall. Yours is falling apart. Toss it. A client gave me some hand cream. It's good for winter skin. I'm bringing it back for you. Lydia's social media was just as busy. There were dozens of photos. Drinking with clients, shopping together, watching fireworks. Each one was a needle in my heart. But eventually the pain just became a dull hum. Finally, on the 7th day, Lucian sent a text. Just landed. Heading to the station to buy a ticket. I'm coming to get you. I smiled. I wasn't going back with him, but I wanted to see him one last time. I headed to the salon to get my hair done. I wanted to look decent for him. Halfway through the appointment, the world tilted. I vomited blood right there in the chair. I knew I was terminal, but the decline was happening so fast. The salon owner panicked. Honey, call your family. Right now. I instinctively dialed Lucian's number. All I heard was a chaotic noise, followed by a sickening crash. Lydia's voice screamed through the phone. Jay. Lucian was in a wreck. There's blood everywhere. You have to come back. The screech of metal on asphalt echoed in my ear long after the call went dead. The salon owner was already holding a wad of paper towels against my mouth, her eyes wild with panic. Sweetheart, sit down. Don't move. I'm calling an ambulance. No, I choked out, pushing her hand away. The metallic taste in my mouth was hot and thick, but my head was entirely somewhere else. No ambulance. I need to get to the train station. Are you insane? You're throwing up blood. My brother, I said, the word tearing at my throat like jagged glass. He was in an accident. I didn't wait for her to answer. I grabbed my coat from the back of the swivel chair, threw a crumpled $100 bill on the counter, and stumbled out into the cold midday air. My knees felt like water. Every breath was a dry rattle in my chest, a dull, thumping ache radiating from beneath my ribs down into my stomach. But adrenaline is a vicious thing. It borrows energy from tomorrow to keep you standing today, even when you have no tomorrows left to spend. I ran down the narrow alley toward my shack to grab my ID. Halfway there, my foot caught on an uneven paving stone, and I hit the frozen ground hard. Shay. A pair of strong hands caught me before my face hit the gravel. Rowan pulled me up by the elbows, his brow furrowed in shock as he saw the smear of dark crimson across my lips and the collar of my sweater. What happened to you? Were you attacked? Rowan station, I gasped, clutching his flannel sleeve so hard my knuckles turned white. Take me to the station, please. He didn't ask questions. He didn't waste time giving a lecture. He saw the terror in my eyes, scooped me up under one arm, and hurried me toward his beat-up pickup truck parked at the mouth of the alley. The drive to the regional hub was a blur of gray trees and salt-crusted asphalt. Rowan drove with one hand on the wheel, and the other keeping a bottle of warm water pressed into my lap. I bought your ticket on my phone, he said quietly, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Fast train. 3 hours. I'm coming with you. You have work, I wheezed, leaning my forehead against the vibrating glass of the passenger window. The demolition surveys. The houses aren't going anywhere until next month, Shay, he replied, his voice calm, firm, and unbothered by my protests. And you look like a stiff breeze would snap you in half. I'm not letting you die on a train platform alone. I closed my eyes. For 10 years, I had shouldered every emergency by myself. When Lucian broke his arm in high school, I had walked 4 miles in a blizzard to borrow money from a loan shark. When he caught pneumonia during his college entrance exams, I sat on a wooden stool in the clinic hallway for 3 nights straight, holding the 4 bag when the hook broke. Nobody had ever said I'm coming with you. I lacked the strength to argue. I let the darkness pull me under. The St. Jude Trauma Center in the capital smelled of burnt coffee and industrial ozone. By the time we arrived, night had fallen. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a low, sickening frequency that made my temples throb. I found the surgical ICU on the 4th floor. Lydia was sitting on the vinyl bench outside the double doors. Her designer wool coat was spotless, but her makeup was streaked with black tracks and her hands were clasped tightly around a paper cup of cold water. 3 of Lucian's senior project managers stood a few paces away, speaking in hushed, anxious tones over their tablets. When Lydia saw me limp out of the elevator, supported by Rowan, her eyes widened. Shay. She rushed over, her heels clicking loudly against the linoleum. You actually made it. How is he? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He's out of surgery, Lydia said, her lip trembling. A delivery truck ran a red light near the central terminal. Lucian swerved to avoid it and hit the concrete divider. He has 3 broken ribs, a fractured femur, and a severe concussion. The doctors said. They said if his seatbelt hadn't held, he would have gone through the windshield. She covered her face with her hands, letting out a ragged sob. He was driving like a maniac, Shay. He wouldn't even let the company driver take him. He just threw his briefcase in the back seat and said he had to catch the 1:15 train or he'd lose his mind. My heart felt as though it were being squeezed by a cold, iron vice. The 1:15 train. The train that was supposed to bring him to my door. Can I see him? I asked. Lydia looked at me, then glanced at Rowan, who stood half a step behind me like a quiet sentinel. A strange, fleeting flicker of calculation passed through her eyes before she smoothed it over with a sorrowful nod. The doctor said only immediate family for 5 minutes. I told them I was his fiancée, so they'd let me wait out here. But you're his sister. Go ahead. Fiancée. The word didn't even sting anymore. It just felt like the final period at the end of a long, exhausting sentence. Thank you, I said. Rowan helped me put on the blue sterile gown and paper booties. As the nurse pushed the heavy ICU door open, Rowan caught my shoulder, his grip gentle but steady. I'll be right here, he said softly. Take your time. The room was cold. The rhythmic, mechanical beep of the heart monitor was the only sound cutting through the sterile silence. Lucian lay on the narrow hospital bed, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His face was bruised purple and yellow along the jawline, a thick white bandage wrapped around his forehead, and his right leg was elevated in a rigid traction. Splint, the arrogant, sharp-edged young titan who had stood under the glittering chandeliers 48 hours ago, was gone. In his place was the bruised, battered boy I had dragged out of an alley dumpster when I was 17 years old. I dragged a plastic chair over, my joints screaming in protest, and sat beside the bed. I reached out with trembling fingers and touched the back of his hand. It was cold, rough, and mapped with faint white scars from the years he spent assembling circuit boards in our freezing basement apartment to save on component costs. You idiot, I whispered, tears blurring my sight. You absolute idiot. You have everything now. The company, the award, the girl, the future. Why were you driving like you had nothing to lose? His eyelids fluttered. A low, dry groan caught in his throat. I froze, holding my breath. Lucian's head turned slowly on the pillow. His dark eyes, clouded with anesthesia and pain, struggled to focus before locking onto my face. The monitor's beep accelerated slightly. She. His voice was a cracked rasp, barely louder than the hum of the oxygen mask beside his cheek. I'm here, I said, leaning closer so he wouldn't strain. Don't move. You broke your leg and your ribs. You're in the hospital. His fingers twitched, then weakly, desperately curled around mine. His grip lacked its usual crushing strength, but the urgency behind it was terrifying. You didn't leave, he mumbled, his brow furrowing in agony as he tried to lift his head. Lie down, Lucian. I'm right here. The train. He breathed, his chest hitching, an expression of raw, unvarnished panic flashing across his battered face. I thought I was too late. I thought you disappeared. I was just visiting home. I lied softly, using my free hand to gently brush a lock of dark hair from his bruised forehead. I told you, I was just taking care of the old house. Don't go back there, he pleaded, his voice thick and slurred with painkillers. Jay, don't go back to that slum. I bought the house. The one by the North Lake. The one with the garden you wanted when we were kids. I signed the deed yesterday morning. My breath hitched. You don't need to buy me a house, Lucian. I do, he insisted, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, a sight I hadn't seen since the night his mother was buried. I had to. You gave up college. You gave up your whole life for me. Everyone said I was a parasite, they said. I was dragging you to hell. I had to become someone who could build a wall high enough so nobody could ever touch you again. He squeezed my hand with all the pathetic, fading strength in his fingers. Lydia. Her family has the venture capital network. That's all she is, Shay. Just business. Just contracts. I told her from day one. My life belongs to the woman who pulled me out of the dirt. Why won't you look at me? Why did you walk away? Every word he spoke felt like a hot blade twisting inside my heart. For 10 years, I had thought his silence was resentment. I thought his coldness was the natural disgust of an ambitious thoroughbred who hated being reminded of the stable he had crawled out of. I thought he stayed out late because my cheap cooking and worn-out sweaters embarrassed him. I thought he looked at Lydia because she was everything I could never be: elegant, educated, whole. He hadn't been running away from me. He had been running in a frantic, desperate circle, trying to build a golden cage to keep me safe, entirely blind to the fact that I was dying inside the dark. Lucian, I whispered, hot tears finally spilling over my cheeks, dripping onto our joined hands. You don't owe me a palace. You never did. I do, he muttered, his eyelids drooping as the heavy sedatives began dragging him back under. Say, Shay, promise me, don't let go. I'm here, I lied again, kissing his cold knuckles. Go to sleep. His breathing evened out. His fingers loosened, slipping limp against the white cotton sheet. I sat there in the dim, sterile room for another 10 minutes, watching his chest rise and fall. Then a sudden, violent spasm seized my midsection. I clamped my hand over my mouth, stumbling out of the chair and lunging through the ICU doors. I barely made it to the visitor restroom at the end of the hall before I collapsed over the sink, vomiting another wave of blackish-red blood into the porcelain basin. I turned the faucet on full blast, watching the water swirl pink, then red, then clear again. My reflection in the mirror was horrifying. My skin was the color of curdled milk, my eyes bloodshot and sunken deep into dark violet sockets. The cancer was metastasizing through my liver. The dull, throbbing ache had turned into a constant, biting fire. I reached into my pocket for the prescription bottle Rowan had brought from my shack. My hands shook so violently that the plastic cap popped off, sending 3 dozen white tablets scattering across the wet tile floor. Damn it, I sobbed, dropping to my knees to gather them up with wet, trembling fingers. Damn it, not now. Just give me 3 more days. The restroom door creaked open. I froze. Lydia stood in the doorway. She looked down at me, kneeling on the dirty bathroom floor, my chin stained with blood, frantically picking up oncology-grade pain suppressants from the grime. The air between us went dead. Lydia didn't scream. She didn't call for a nurse. She walked in slowly, letting the door swing shut behind her, and bent down. With calm, manicured fingers, she picked up one of the white pills near her. Designer Heal, and read the stamped manufacturer code on the back. She had spent 3 years handling biotech investments for Lucian's firm. She knew exactly what that code meant. Targeted palliative therapy, Lydia said, her voice quiet, steady, and entirely devoid of its usual performative sweetness. Late-stage gastrointestinal carcinoma. How long? I didn't answer. I scooped the remaining pills into my palm, pulled myself up, using the edge of the sink, and rinsed my mouth with tap water. How long, Shay? She repeated, stepping closer. 2 months. Maybe 3 weeks if the internal bleeding doesn't stop, I said, wiping my mouth with a paper towel. You don't need to look so worried, Lydia. I'm not here to steal him back. Lydia leaned against the tiled wall, folding her arms over her chest. The polished, agreeable socialite mask had vanished completely, revealing the sharp, calculated mind that had made her a multimillionaire at 25. I knew something was wrong with you, Lydia murmured, staring at me with a mixture of shock and cold fascination. At the gala, you looked at that trophy like it was a gravestone. I thought you were just playing the martyr to make him feel guilty. I don't play games, I said, leaning heavily against the basin to keep my legs from folding. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Let him believe whatever he needs to believe to recover. Tell him I went to travel. Tell him I found someone else. Tell him whatever keeps him focused on the company. Lydia let out a short, dry laugh that had no humor in it. You really don't understand him at all, do you? I frowned, looking at her through the mirror. Do you know why he refused to sign our joint venture partnership last month? Lydia asked, her eyes hardening. A $40 million institutional round from my father's fund. He turned it down because the contract required him to relocate the headquarters to New York for 5 years. She stepped right up behind me, her reflection looming over mine. He told my father that his sister gets car sick on long drives and hates cold winters. He said he would rather take a predatory bank loan at 12% interest and keep the office in this dusty city than make you move somewhere you didn't like. My breath caught in my throat. He doesn't love me, Shay, Lydia said, her voice dropping into a harsh, bitter whisper. He has never looked at me once without calculating how many dollars my family's name could add to your security. If he finds out you're dying, he won't manage the firm. He won't take the IPO. He will burn every single bridge, liquidate every asset, and drag you to every clinic on earth until he goes bankrupt or kills himself trying. She grabbed my arm, not roughly but with a cold, desperate intensity. You spent 10 years turning a gutter dog into a king, Lydia hissed. If you let him see you rot, you will destroy everything you bled for. If you truly care about him, vanish. Let him hate you. Hate is something a man can survive. Grief will kill him. I stood there in the cold bathroom, listening to the hum of the ventilation fan. Her words were cruel, calculating, and entirely self-serving. She wanted the company intact. She wanted Lucian whole, so she could eventually claim the empty seat beside him. And yet, every word she said was the absolute, unvarnished truth. Lucian was an extremist. He was a boy forged in the fires of an abusive home, a boy who knew only 2 states of existence: absolute obsession or utter ruin. If he knew my marrow was failing, if he knew my liver was turning to ash, he would abandon the company board, default on his loans, and spend his last dime chasing impossible miracle cures while watching me wither in an ICU bed. I couldn't let his life end where mine did. Help me get out of here, I whispered. Lydia's eyes widened slightly. Now, before the morning shift changes, I said, my voice dead and hollow. Before he wakes up. I walked out of the restroom. Rowan was waiting in the corridor, sitting on the bench with 2 paper cups of hot tea. When he saw my face, he stood up. Immediately, crushing the cups in his hands. Take me home, Rowan, I said quietly. Take me back to the shack. Rowan looked at Lydia, who stood in the hallway with an unreadable expression, then looked down at my blood-spotted cuffs. He didn't ask a single question. He simply took off his heavy winter coat, wrapped it securely around my shoulders, and supported my weight as we walked toward the elevator. As the metal doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of the hallway leading to the surgical ICU. Goodbye, Lucian. This time, I'm really setting you free. We returned to the old neighborhood just as the first winter blizzard of the season began to blanket the city in white. The alley was nearly deserted now. Most of the remaining holdout families had signed their relocation agreements and moved into temporary housing. Only my crumbling brick house and Rowan's temporary rented unit next door remained occupied. The cold was brutal. It seeped through the cracks in the window frames, coating the inner glass with intricate feathers of frost. Rowan moved his cot and his drafting table into my living room. He brought over an electric space heater, 3 thick wool quilts, and a large cast iron pot. Every morning, he would wake up early, chop firewood for the small cast iron stove in the corner, and simmer pots of chicken broth and soft root vegetables. He never spoke about what he saw in the hospital. He never asked why I had a bag full of targeted chemotherapy pills, or why I couldn't keep solid food down. Instead, he sat by the stove, sketching blueprints of future parks and public libraries, showing them to me like we were old colleagues. Look at this one, Shay, he said one afternoon, holding up a sheet of tracing paper covered in delicate graphite lines. A community greenhouse in the center of the demolition zone. All glass and reclaimed timber. We could plant winter magnolias in the center. What do you think? I leaned back against the mountain of pillows, a cup of warm ginger water cradled in my trembling hands. Magnolias need too much sunlight, I said, my voice soft and airy. Plant camellias instead. They survive the frost. Rowan smiled, his pencil moving smoothly across the paper. Camellias it is. He was good to me, not with the frantic, suffocating guilt that Lucian carried, but with the quiet, uncomplicated kindness of a person who simply believed that no human being should have to sit in the cold. On the 5th day after our return, my phone began to ring. It was Lucian's personal assistant, then his lead engineer, then 3 dozen unknown numbers from the capital. I turned the phone off, took out the SIM card, and dropped it into the cast iron stove. I watched the tiny piece of plastic curl, blacken, and turn to gray ash among the glowing embers. Clean break? Rowan asked from his drafting table, not looking up from his ruler. Clean break, I replied. That night, the pain returned with a vengeance that medicine could no longer blunt. I spent hours curled on my side, clutching my stomach, cold sweat soaking through my sweater while Rowan sat on the edge of the cot, holding my ice-cold feet in his warm hands, gently rubbing the cramped muscles until the spasms subsided into a dull, trembling exhaustion. You know, Rowan said softly into the dark, his voice low and steady, you don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders until the very last second. You're allowed to just be tired. A single, silent tear slipped from the corner of my eye, soaking into the cotton pillowcase. I am tired, Rowan, I whispered. I've been tired for 10 years. Then rest, he said, pulling the quilt up to my chin. I'll keep the fire going. In the capital, 300 miles away, the fire was already burning. Lucian woke up on the 3rd day after his surgery, his fever finally breaking. The moment his vision cleared, he demanded his clothes, tearing the 4 monitor from the back of his hand despite the nurse's frantic protests. Where is she? He roared, his voice hoarse, his broken ribs screaming in agony, as he forced his legs over the edge of the bed. Where did she go? Lydia entered the private room, carrying a fresh bouquet of white lilies. She set them on the bedside table and looked at him with cool, composed eyes. She left, Lucian. What do you mean she left? He tried to stand, but his fractured femur gave out, and he crashed onto the floor, dragging the 4-pole down with a deafening, metallic clatter. She was here. She held my hand. She told me she was staying. Lydia didn't help him up. She stood over him, watching him crawl across the floor like a wounded beast. She came with a man, Lydia said, her voice entirely flat. A man named Rowan. They took the morning train back together. She told me to tell you that you've paid your debt, the company is yours, and she wants to start her own life without being your shadow. You're lying, Lucian yelled, his face turning an ugly, mottled red as he slammed his fist against the floorboards. Shay would never say that. She has. Nobody. I am her only family. Look at her phone, Lucian. Call her. Lucian frantically dragged himself toward the bedside table, grabbed his phone, and dialed. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He dialed again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the opposite wall, plastic and glass exploding in all directions. Prepare the car, Lucian gasped, blood seeping through the fresh bandages on his torso as he dragged himself up by the bed frame. Get the car right now. You have an emergency board meeting in 2 hours, Lydia said, coldly blocking the doorway. The venture syndicate is voting on the Series B term sheet. If you leave the city today, the lead investor pulls out, the loans come due, and the firm files for Chapter 11 by Friday. Lucian looked at her. His eyes were completely wild, bloodshot, and filled with a terrifying, unhinged darkness. Then let it burn, he whispered. He grabbed the heavy metal crutch resting against the wall, shoved Lydia aside with such force that she stumbled into the corridor and limped toward the elevator in his hospital gown, leaving a trail of dark red droplets along the pristine white floor. The blizzard had buried the old alley under nearly 2 feet of powdery, drifting snow. The demolition excavators sat at the end of the street like giant, sleeping yellow beasts, their engines silent, waiting for the weather to clear. Inside the brick house, the air was warm and smelled of dried orange peels and pine smoke. I was lying on the cot, wrapped in 3 layers of wool. I couldn't sit up anymore. My vision had grown milky at the edges, the world fading into soft, dreamlike pastels. Rowan was sitting by the window, carving a small wooden sparrow from a block of cedar. The rhythmic shhh of his pocket knife was the most peaceful thing I had ever heard. Rowan, I murmured, my voice faint, like dry leaves scraping across stone. Yeshe. He set the wood down immediately and came to kneel beside the cot. The demolition money. I whispered, my breathing shallow and slow. I signed the agreement yesterday. It's on the table. I know, he said gently, taking my paper-thin hand into his warm palms. Half of it goes to you, I breathed. For the wood. For the soup. For staying. Rowan let out a soft, sad chuckle, shaking his head. I don't need your money, silly girl. I get paid by the city. Take it, I insisted, squeezing his fingers with the last ounce of will I possessed. And the other half, send it to the municipal scholarship fund. For kids. Kids who don't have parents. Kids who are smart, but have to eat out of trash cans. Okay, Rowan promised, his voice thick with emotion as he brought my hand to his forehead. I'll make sure every penny goes to them. I swear it. Good. I closed my eyes. The pain was finally gone. The fire in my stomach had burned itself out, leaving behind a profound, weightless coolness. I thought of my parents. I thought of the small garden we used to have behind the brick house before the world got so loud and complicated. I remembered my mother's laugh, my father's calloused hands swinging me onto his shoulders, the smell of summer grass after a sudden thunderstorm. I did good, I thought to myself. I kept my promise. I didn't let him starve. Outside, the faint sound of tires spinning frantically in deep snow broke through the winter silence. A car door slammed. Heavy, uneven footsteps came crashing through the snowdrifts, accompanied by the frantic, ragged sound of someone screaming my name. She. The wooden door was kicked off its rusted hinges with a splintering crash. A gust of icy wind and swirling snow roared into the warm room. Lucian stood in the doorway. He was wearing a torn hospital coat over a thin gray sweater, no gloves, no boots, only blood-soaked bandages wrapped around his bare feet and his right leg, clamped in a bent, broken splint. His face was gray with frostbite, his lips blue, his hands covered in cuts from where he had crawled through the drifts after his car got stuck at the end of the lane. Behind him, 2 of his junior executives stood panting in the snow, terrified and helpless. Lucian's eyes swept across the dim room, bypassing the cast-iron stove, bypassing Rowan, and locking onto the narrow cot in the corner. He choked out, his crutch slipping from his frozen fingers, clattering onto the floorboards. He dropped to his knees. He didn't care about his broken bones. He didn't care about the agony tearing through his shattered femur. He dragged himself across the floor, his fingernails digging into the wooden planks, leaving a red smear behind him until he reached the edge of the cot. Shay, look at me. I'm here. I came to get you. He reached out with a trembling, frostbitten hand to touch my cheek. My skin was entirely cold. My face was peaceful, my lips slightly parted, my eyes closed beneath pale, translucent lids that would never flutter open again. Lucian froze. His hand hovered half an inch from my face, his entire body locking into rigid, petrified stone. Shay, he whispered, a small childlike sound. Shay, stop playing. Wake up. The house by the lake is ready. I brought the keys. Look. I brought the keys. He fumbled frantically inside his torn pocket, pulling out a heavy brass key on a leather loop, pressing it against my limp, open palm. The key slipped from my lifeless fingers and dropped onto the quilt with a dull thud. Rowan stood up slowly from the stool. He didn't yell. He didn't strike Lucian. He simply looked down at the shivering, broken billionaire with eyes full of infinite, crushing pity. "She's gone, son," Rowan said softly. "She passed 10 minutes ago." "No." Lucian's voice was barely a breath. "No, no, no, no." He grabbed my shoulders, pulling my limp upper body into his arms, pressing his face against my cold neck, sobbing so violently that his entire frame convulsed. "Jay, wake up. You promised. You said you'd wait for me," he screamed, his voice breaking into an unearthly, animalistic shriek that tore through the empty house and echoed across the snowy ruins of the street. "I bought the firm for you. I made the money for you. Take it back. I don't want any of it. Jay, please." He rocked me back and forth in the freezing draft of the open door, his tears falling hot and thick onto my cold forehead, trying desperately to rub the warmth back into my hands, my arms, my face. On the drafting table near the window, the morning breeze ruffled a stack of papers. At the very top lay the Young Entrepreneur Award trophy, polished until the brass shone like a mirror, wiped clean of every fingerprint. Beside it lay a simple, handwritten note in my familiar, uneven cursive. "To Lucian, don't hate your father anymore. Hate is too heavy a luggage to carry into a bright room. Don't build golden walls. Just build a life." The boy in the trash became a king. "My job is done. Eat your meals on time. Don't drink on an empty stomach. Goodbye, little brother." Lucian saw the note. He picked up the paper with trembling, bloody fingers. He read the 5 short sentences once, twice, 3 times, until the ink began to run beneath his falling tears. Then he clutched the note against his chest, bowed his head until his forehead touched the floorboards at the foot of the cot, and wailed until his voice gave out entirely, coughing up his own blood into the dust. Spring came late that year. The old brick shacks were gone, cleared away by the city's urban renewal project. In their place stood a vast, open public park filled with young willow trees, stone walking paths, and hundreds of blooming red camellias. At the center of the park stood a small, elegant stone pavilion, its bronze plaque reading, "The SHAE Memorial Sanctuary, a place for the weary to rest." On a quiet Tuesday morning, a man walked down the gravel path. He leaned lightly on an ebony cane, wearing a simple, unbranded black coat. The fierce, predatory arrogance that had once defined his face was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet stillness that made him look older than his 28 years. Lucian stopped before the stone marker. He didn't bring expensive lilies or imported orchids. He brought a single paper cup of hot dumpling soup from the small diner down the avenue and a branch of wild camellia blossoms. He set the soup on the stone ledge, sat down on the wooden bench beside the pavilion, and looked out over the green lawn where children from the nearby municipal elementary school were playing tag in the sunshine. Behind him, his assistant stood 50 paces away, holding a folder containing the annual report of the Shea Foundation, a non-profit endowment that had already provided housing, medical care, and university scholarships to over 4,000 orphan teenagers across the country. Lucian took a slow, deep breath of the fresh spring air. "The camellias survived the frost, Shea," he said softly to the empty breeze. "Just like you said they would." He closed his eyes, feeling the gentle warmth of the morning sun against his face, and for the first time in 10 long years, the corner of his mouth curved into a faint, peaceful smile.